Hello, welcome to Chapter 9 on body image. We're first in this chapter going to go through some history of body image and how the bit of ideas we have on how we got to where we're at now. What we do know is from our ancient ancestors, essentially from the Ice Age to the Renaissance period, body fat itself indicated wealth, power, abundance. It meant there was decreased physical labor going on in that person's life, and this was highly valued, and it was very rare. In the late 1800s, we began to have a lot of advances in science and agriculture, and that changed farming and food practices. Things like mechanical reaping machines, steam engines, refrigeration. Food became less costly and much more plentiful. And then around 1890, we can tell that there was like an increase in dieting and value of thinness. And here in the States, in America, after Christopher Columbus came and the influx of Europeans came to the East Coast, essentially these people were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. They were people of middle-class America and Northern Europe, and they were obsessed with order, cleanliness, and control. And as part of their religiosity, they had a deep fear of sensual, body-based pleasure. So temperance and modesty were spiritually prized, and body fat itself began to be viewed as an indicator of weak will, that gluttony was sinful, and it indicated lack of restraint. So these things were looked down upon. Now, in melting pot America, family name and position started to become less relevant, and physical cues became more relevant. So we were paying attention to not only color of your skin, but speech, mannerisms, clothing, and your body size to indicate your social position. And by 1920, there was a standardized middle-class body ideal. Fad diets started coming around, gadgets related to being thin, such as like obesity belts and tonics, odd diets called perfect chewing that were considered to be like this way to purify the body. So in addition to things like those mechanical reapers and refrigeration that was changing farming practices, in the late 1800s, railroads started to introduce magazines and mail order for things related to the house, but also delivering ready-to-wear sized clothing. Prior to that time, most clothes were just made at home. So your clothes were made to fit your body. So in the late 1800s, when these magazines started arriving, clothes were standardized, and people started to have this idea of, I should be a certain size, I need to fit in these clothes. So weight occupation started to increase. There was a note that it started to decrease during World War I and World War II. So there was a bit of a drop back, but then it started to skyrocket again in the 1950s with these fitness gurus like Jane Fonda and Jack LaLanne. And what we want to do here is also introduce what started to happen in the aims of feminism. For much of written history, women have been treated as property with very few legal rights. And the body fat ideal for fertility is considered 22 to 28%. To start to reduce it to 15% for what is often like a lot of models starts to create a struggle against our own biological evolution. So people, or women, are left then to perpetually police themselves to maintain like semi-starvation in this environment of plenty. And that alone starts to feed depression, helplessness, and low self-esteem. A preoccupied woman is less likely to rock the boat. Here's a timeline related to feminism and body image. So in 1890s, the women's suffrage and legal equality, while that was happening, the slender Gibson girl started to become very popularized. By the 1920s, when women were getting the right to vote, the body ideal was becoming even more skinny. In the 1950s, when there was all this like domestication happening and World War II was going on and women were forced to not only be in the home but also start to having jobs, there was this busty, full-figured ideal, which then reversed again in the 1960s and 70s when women were getting a lot of empowerment through birth control and like the sexual revolution. At that point, the female ideal was this emancipated version. Often people remember examples of Twiggy, and eating disorders themselves became more widespread. All of these facts are really well talked about in Fat Politics by Eric Oliver, if you want to read more. So keep going with the feminism. Most of the increased calories consumed in the last 50 years is between meal snacking. And the reason why that's important is because that's also related to women. So as people started to have cars and desk jobs, there's less activity going on in their life and then more time to snack. And specifically, snacking was previously absent because it was hard to produce meals. Meals were expensive and inconvenient to prepare. And women were working often around the clock at home just to get their families fed. So as women entered the workforce, not only were women not at home, there was a new need now for food to be quick and easy. So here comes things like grocery businesses and big agriculture just taking advantage of what's going on in our culture, where now there needs to be food that can't go stale, food that has to be preserved. Frozen TV dinners and fast food started coming around in the 1950s. And around that time, food started to be also sold everywhere, such as gas stations and shoe stores. I'll show you this clip right here.
Sometimes people say to me, "You've been talking about this for 40 years. Have things gotten any better?" And actually, I have to say, really, they've gotten worse. Ads sell more than products. They sell values, they sell images, they sell concepts of love and sexuality, of success, and perhaps most important, of normalcy. To a great extent, they tell us who we are and who we should be. Well, what does advertising tell us about women? It tells us, as it always has, that what's most important is how we look. So the first thing the advertisers do is surround us with the image of ideal female beauty. Women learn from a very early age that we must spend enormous amounts of time, energy, and above all, money, striving to achieve this look and feeling ashamed and guilty when we fail. And failure is inevitable because the ideal is based on absolute flawlessness. She never has any lines or wrinkles. She certainly has no scars or blemishes. Indeed, she has no pores. And the most important aspect of this flawlessness is that it cannot be achieved. No one looks like this, including her. And this is the truth. No one looks like this. The supermodel Cindy Crawford once said, "I wish I looked like Cindy Crawford." She doesn't, she couldn't, because this is a look that's been created for years through airbrushing and cosmetics, but these days it's done through the magic of computer retouching. Keira Knightley is given a bigger bust. Jessica Alba is made smaller. Kelly Clarkson, well, this isn't interesting. It says slim down your way, but she in fact slimmed down the Photoshop way. You almost never see a photograph of a woman considered beautiful that hasn't been photoshopped. We all grow up in a culture in which women's bodies are constantly turned into things, into objects. Here she's become the bottle of Michelob. In this ad, she becomes part of a video game. And this is everywhere, in all kinds of advertising. Women's bodies turned into things, into objects. Now, of course, this affects female self-esteem. It also does something even more insidious. It creates a climate in which there's widespread violence against women. I'm not at all saying that an ad like this directly causes violence. It's not that simple. But turning a human being into a thing is almost always the first step toward justifying violence against that person. We see this with racism. We see it with homophobia. We see it with terrorism. It's always the same process. The person is dehumanized and violence then becomes inevitable. And that step is already and constantly taken with women. Women's bodies are dismembered in ads, hacked apart. Just one part of the body is focused upon, which of course is the most dehumanizing thing you could do to someone. Everywhere we look, women's bodies turned into things and often just parts of things. And girls are getting the message these days so young that they need to be impossibly beautiful, hot, sexy, extremely thin, and they also get the message that they're going to fail, that there's no way to really achieve it. Girls tend to feel fine about themselves when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, but they hit adolescence and they hit a wall. And certainly part of this wall is this terrible emphasis on physical perfection. So no wonder we have an epidemic of eating disorders in our country and increasingly throughout the world. I've been talking about this for a very long time, and I keep thinking that the models can't get any thinner, but they do. They get thinner and thinner and thinner. This is Anna Carolina Reston, who died a year ago of anorexia, weighing 88 pounds, and at the time she was still modeling. So the models literally cannot get any thinner. So Photoshop is brought to the rescue. There are exceptions, however. Kate Winslet has been outspoken about her refusal to allow Hollywood to dictate her weight. When British GQ magazine published this photograph of Winslet, which was digitally enhanced to make her look dramatically thinner, she issued a statement that the alterations were made without her consent. And she said, "I don't look like that, and more importantly, I don't desire to look like that. I can tell you that they've reduced the size of my legs by about a third." Bless her heart. So what can we do about all of this? Well, the first step is to become aware, to pay attention, and to recognize that this affects all of us. These are public health problems that I'm talking about. The obsession with thinness is a public health problem. The tyranny of the ideal image of beauty, violence against women. These are all public health problems that affect us all. And public health problems can only be solved by changing the environment.
Another point about religiosity, and we're not here to say that religion is bad or good, but what we do know from monotheism is that it fosters a disconnection from the body. People are often taught that they're born in sin, that the body is greedy or lustful. And Judeo-Christian religions are redemptive, meaning you'll get your reward in heaven, that there's value in suffering now. They teach to turn the other cheek and pray for your enemies. And I know this is a very loaded topic, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because this relates to our own relationship with our bodies and our ability to trust our bodies and to even be willing to feel safe to listen to our bodies. When it comes to body image, here are some experiments that you can start to do to change the way you view yourself. First of all, begin to filter out media that overly focuses on the body ideal. Step off the scale, throw away your scale, cover up your mirror or turn your mirrors around. Do the interpersonal work to stop comparing yourself to others. Spend time with people who have a healthy relationship to their food and your body. It's really surprising how much that can rub off in a positive way when we have positive role models. Broaden your own perspective of health and beauty. There's a lot of amazing people out there doing like body restorative work on Instagram and TikTok. And most importantly, begin to focus on how your body feels rather than how it looks. Body image is defined as the ability to accept and appreciate your unique body with the understanding that a person's body says very little about their character and value as a person. Negative body image includes feelings of shame or anxiety about the body and views the body as a sign of a personal failure. When it comes to self-esteem, the idea here is to begin focusing instead of what's good or bad, but on wholeness. It implies striving for a sense of completeness, integration, and self-acceptance. And here are some experiments. These are just to begin to mix up your neural pathways. Sit at a different place at the kitchen table or the couch. Sleep on the other side of the bed. Make an art collage that represents your values, new beliefs, and affirmations. And some reflections. When do I find it most difficult to love myself? What stops me from receiving? Do I believe I am worthy and capable of living my dreams? Why? Collect a baby picture of yourself, and once each day, look at the baby picture and ask, what can I do for this child today? What is my inner critic telling me right now? How often do I listen to my inner critic? How do I typically respond to my inner critic's negative self-talk? And what would happen if I stopped listening altogether? Can I identify any positive aspects of my inner critic or ways in which it may be helpful? Thank you for listening to Chapter 9 on body image.